Hello and welcome back to the Modern Leader Way, where this is the 100th episode, and I have a very special guest with me today, because not only is this someone that I used to work with and hold in very high regard, but it's the first gentleman that I have invited onto the show. So welcome, Russell Higginbotham.
Well, I'm deeply honoured, A, to be your 100th guest, and B, to be your first guy on the show. That's amazing. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I saw you post on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about something that was a deeply personal update that you wanted to share in terms of some essential life and career lessons that you had learned since leaving your latest role. And I just knew when I saw that I had to invite you on to have this conversation because it's so aligned with what I've been bringing to the podcast so far in terms of slowing down, listening to your body, and bringing in some of that element of pause to make sure that you're actually on the right track for one, but also that you're not just pushing and forcing through on the sort of path that you forged for yourself perhaps years ago that may not actually be aligned with where you're going moving forward. So
Hmm.
I am deeply passionate about helping women in particular in insurance in particular, because that's where we come from, to really get off that treadmill to burnout, as I call it, and just get on their own path, whether that is in the same like career that they're in at the moment or if that takes a different turn. So I really wanted to have you on to have this conversation, and I'm excited as to where this could go. So why don't you give us a bit of a background CV check, if you like, of your 30-year career to date. And there will be listeners that come from insurance, but there will be many that don't. So yeah,
Okay.
give us an intro.
All right. No problem. I'll try and make it short and sweet. So I guess I've been in that sort of insurance, reinsurance world my whole career, not necessarily by design, but I went on a undergraduate training program at the first insurance company. So literally when I went to university, and that was just to earn money in the summer holidays and to get some work experience, that kind of thing. But I guess I found A, I quite liked it, but B, it also meant that when I came out of university, that was my experience and that was the direction I took. So I had a job with that company for a couple of years. And then I decided to, I wanted to work in London because London was a happening place in its huge reinsurance market. So I got a job in London with Munich Re, so the largest global reinsurer. So I was there for about 3 years, which was fantastic. And then I joined Swiss Re. So that would have been in '94. I'm sure some listeners might not have even been born then, right? But yeah, so way back then, and I guess when I joined then, my mindset was, this is the next job. It's going to be the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to learn something, and then I'm going to move on. But actually, as it turned out, I never did because every whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 years, another opportunity came, and it was Swiss Re is a large global organization, employs 15, 16,000 people. And I guess my mindset was open to work anywhere, right? I didn't sort of see the world as the London or the UK. So in Swiss Re, I ended up in 2002. I moved to Japan, where I ran Swiss Re's life and health business, which then extended to Japan and Korea. And then in 2006, I moved down under to run Swiss Re's Australia New Zealand business. 2010, so 8 or 9 years after I moved to Asia, I came back to the UK. The plan was to go for 2 years. It was ended up being 8 or 9. So I ran Swiss Re's UK business, and then I think then when we started to interact, I was running Swiss Re's life and health business globally, which was 2015. Then I ran Swiss Re's Europe, Middle East, Africa region for only for a year because I had to move to Asia as something changed in Swiss Re. So I moved out to Singapore in 2019. During the COVID years, I was there. Came back in 22, and then I was running Swiss Re's. It was called a solutions business. It was where Swiss Re was trying to commercialize its IP and knowledge through data and software solutions until the end of last year, where I entered up after just as I passed my 30-year anniversary. I entered up. It was decided I was going to leave Swiss Re, so I'm now in a period of garden leave, which I've never done before. Done many things in my life, but never been in a period of garden leave, which actually is sort of just as interesting, refreshing, and a learning opportunity in different ways. So there we go. Probably too much detail, but
No, not at all.
that's the summary.
I lost track. I don't even think I knew you went back to Asia actually in 2019. So that was after I left. But some parallels there as well. I mean, my career was nothing like yours, but I got made redundant just around the time of my 20-year anniversary at Swiss Re, and also yeah, we worked together in 2015 on the strategy 2020,
Exactly.
which felt like so far in the future and now feels like a long distant memory that we'd rather forget, right?
Yeah, that was a good that was a good strategy as well. I mean, I think the numbers that we thought about came to bear, and a lot of the initiatives we put in there also came through. Swiss Re relatively recently hired a chief data officer type of role, and that was I remember that was something we proposed way back then. So you have these ideas. Sometimes they don't come around as quickly as you want them to, but when they do come, you think, oh, I remember that. Yeah, so
Nice.
that's good.
Nice. So talk to us then about that period in January. Like, was it a surprise to you that this kind of came to an end, or was it something that you were very much involved in the discussion around? And like, how did it feel?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, so I guess the thing that triggered, there's been a lot of change at Swiss Re in the recent times, which is organizations go through that. So there was a new group CEO who's come in and, bringing his own thoughts and his own strategy. So the area that I was running came under review, as did a number of other areas. So I would say relatively early in that piece, it became clear to me that there was a strong likelihood that the role I was doing was no longer going to exist, which is a sort of a moment in time when you see that, and then you start to wonder what's going to happen, how's it going to be, how should I behave, and my view was, well, what will happen, that sort of it is what it is sort of approach. So I just did what I always did, was best to do the best job for the company and for my colleagues, and make sure that the review that we were doing was good and was solid. So when the actual kind of moment of discussion came, that was all happening in June, July, August, and then the moment of discussion was really around November time. So there's plenty of time to sort of think about it and contemplate what might come. But the final sort of the actual discussion was around then, and I ended up leaving the organisation well, I'm still technically employed, but going on to garden leave at the from the 31st of December last year. So yeah, so I guess when it depends, everyone's different, and you react in different ways to these things. I think for me, 30 years in an organization is a very long time, and I could have stayed until sort of retirement, but after moments of sort of thought and contemplation, you think, well, actually, it's better to stop somewhere when you're relatively still feeling fresh and energized, and it gives you a chance to do other things. So I think when this happens to people, you would have had this as well, I guess, Emma. You sort of there are moments where you say, "Why me? What did I do wrong? What could I have done better?" But I think you also have to you get into a mode of just realizing actually a lot of these things it's not personal, and it just sometimes these things happen. And for you and I to have kind of had good careers for 20 and 30 years is actually quite incredible in many ways.
Yeah.
But then it's also incredible that then one door closes, another one opens. So I've come to sort of view it as a moment of serendipity in a sense, and actually opening a door to a new chapter.
Oh, I love that. And actually, my most listened to or most downloaded episode on the podcast so far in 100 episodes was the one where I talked about my redundancy, and I labeled it redundancy risk or opportunity because I think I had always thought it was probably the worst thing that could ever happen to me until it
Yeah,
happened. And then I was like, actually, this is an opportunity for me to spread my wings and perhaps go and do some things, like apply my skills to things that perhaps I had never seen
yeah,
myself doing because, like you said, we're like in it for life.
yeah. Yeah, and look, I mean, as a, whatever you want to call it, CEO or head of a unit or whatever, I've had that not very nice experience of making a number of people redundant over the
Yeah.
years. And I've always tried to do it in a thoughtful, caring way, because it is a traumatic period, particularly if it comes as a surprise.
Yeah.
And, of all those individuals. I think, again, same thing. It was nobody's particular fault. It's sort of higher level company decisions around cost or strategy or whatever. And I can't think of anyone that hasn't ended up eventually, either sooner or somewhat later, in a better place, because good
Mm,
people will always thrive
yeah.
in what the world has to offer. So once you've been in an organization for 30 years, you tend to have a sort of defined view of what your universe looks like, and actually suddenly that changes, and you're in a much bigger universe. And the things like your network kick into play. So, I guess a lesson I'd say to anyone listening to this is, you know, I know we're going to talk about sort of health and so on, but actually maintaining a really active network is really important in these things. I had a call with a guy today who said, I remember you helped me out sort of 15 years ago when I lost my job. And now he's working in another area, which is really, really interesting. And he said, you were the first person that came to mind to see if I could sort of repay that
Oh,
time that you gave me. So, people
yeah.
people are genuine, people are nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyway,
Yeah, no, it's a valid point because just before we hit record, when you were asking how things were going, I said actually it's my network where my opportunities have come from.
yeah,
Absolutely, since I've been gone for nearly 8 years now. So, and it's still that old network that keep coming up and keep coming up, and it's like it's been. I'm so glad and grateful that I had that approach for my career where I just took the time to nurture those relationships
yeah,
with no like I didn't know this was gonna be why I needed to, but it was just a genuine um connection in me that wanted to create those relationships and nurture them. So I think that's yeah, crucial. And I was going to say I only had to deliver the news about redundancies to a team once, and it was probably the low point of my career, and I never
yeah,
wanted to do it again. So I
yeah,
don't envy anyone having to do that. And actually, I think I made my boss's job way too easy when he came to giving me the news because I'd already made up my mind. I knew it was coming and kind of made my mind up. But it's
yeah,
not that smooth sailing for everyone, and there is that emotional roller coaster you go through. It's almost like I had a focus group that I was running, and they were all people that had been made redundant recently or were like in between jobs. And we were talking about the five stages of grief. It's like
yeah,
there's the five stages of like job loss
yeah,
because you do go through that rejection, and even though you can logically like rationalize the fact that it's not personal, when you're in it it's like why me, and then you kind of come out the other end and
yeah.
and you do hopefully 9 times out of 10 see it as an opportunity. So
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you can't sort of fast track that. Well, I mean, awareness means you understand what's happening in your mind and you can work your way through it, but you can't skip stages and sort of jump to the end. So everyone has to go through that in their own way for sure.
so talk to us about then what happened when you stopped, because this was the point of your post that I came across recently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually. So, yeah, I mean, I was amazed how much traction that post got. I was really just sharing a bit of a story, and I was trying to actually help also promote the guy who helped me find my way out of it at the same time. But yeah, it really took off and had I think it's nudging towards 60,000 views,
Wow.
which is amazing. Um, yeah, so when I was sort of at that exit point, I was playing tennis actually and twinged a calf muscle, and these things happen as you're getting on a bit and whatever. But then the next day, I actually noticed on my opposite side, I had a bit of a sore back, so I sort of put these two things together. And like anyone, you think, okay, what am I going to do? Just let it rest for a couple of days, see if it's okay. And it wasn't. So then I thought, okay, I was playing sports, so I go to the sports physio, have sort of deep tissue massage and some this, that, and the other. Actually, that made it seemed to get worse, right? And then you think, okay, this is getting a bit more sort of sticky. So I went to an osteopath. I live in a village, and there just happens to be an osteopath in the village. So I thought, okay, let's go there. They had a fiddle around, and they said, not sure we can help you. You should go to the doctor. Doctor gave me loads of drugs, which is also an interesting experience of how these things are treated. You start with paracetamol, then you go to ibuprofen, then they give you some Valium, then they give you some cocodamol. And you sort of look at what the drugs that you're taking, and then you start taking drugs to deal with the side effects, right? So here's one for your stomach lining, here's one for this, here's one. Like, wow, I'm like a walking pillbox by this stage. So eventually, I was referred to a sort of a back surgeon who I went to see, and he said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do some steroid injections into the problem area." I had lots of scans and everything. He said, "Yeah, 90% of the time this works, and we will be sorted." So I was quite optimistic, and so I went for that. And then I felt all right for a day, actually. I think that was the local anesthetic. And then the next day it was back and worse. And so actually it started from a health perspective because I've always been reasonably fit, reasonably healthy, haven't had any challenges. And suddenly you've got a major problem where you're sort of walking sideways and crunched over and you can't sleep. And yeah, and that was a certain moment, which is, when I found this guy who was recommended, who's a sort of fundamentally a chiropractor, but also has a kind of more holistic view on health, So I met him, and he started to treat me, change diet, change sort of got rid of all the drugs, and went on to some supplements, and quit drinking for for a period of time,
Wow.
right? And I think what I learned in this, there was no kind of fast track, to recovery. It was a bit of a haul over weeks and months. But you start to feel yourself getting better and moving in the right direction, and then things that you were doing start to normalize, and
Mm.
then you realize I'm getting better, and then you get better, and you think, wow, I've come out the other side. So it was definitely a difficult period of time. There's some very sort of dark moments when you definitely can't sleep at night and stuff like that. But it also gives you some lessons around how to have a better balance in terms of lifestyle. And I guess what I saw is your body as a human can do extraordinary things to support what you're doing,
Mhm.
but it's like a credit card, or an overdraft. Sometimes, at some point, you got to pay back, right? And I think stopping work was so. I think I would say to say I abused my body sounds a bit extreme, but I'd led a life that was one where my body was writing these checks that were eventually going to get cashed, and that moment of stopping working was one where your body would basically, or my body was basically saying, aha, right then, I don't have to keep you going anymore. Now it's my turn. And
Mm.
so that, yeah, interesting time.
Yeah. And actually there's you actually mentioned in your post something about support because your back is all like it supports your whole body, right? This
Yeah,
spine and the structure. And it's almost like how are you so your body supports your or your spine supports you all this time and it is
yeah,
like what are you doing to support it in terms of like rest and recuperation
yeah,
and all that kind of thing. And I think that's been part of my message in terms of like this push and force because we kind of push through and like all the travel and
yeah,
the schedule, the late nights, the always being switched on, it has its toll. And unfortunately, we do start to feel it when we get older, and our body is less forgiving as we kind of push on through to the same extent. And actually the modern leader way for me is it's kind of multifaceted, but one of those kind of layers is I talk about it. The world is kind of crying out for a new era of healthy feminine leadership. And for me, feminine leadership isn't just for women. And so we've always talked about left brain and right brain
yeah,
being like if you're left brain, that's all your logical thinking, your strategic, that's where you do your planning and your right brain is where you're more creative and that's where you get your innovation from and that's where empathy lives and emotional intelligence and that kind of thing. It's kind of like that
yeah,
way of looking at leadership traits being like masculine and feminine and men and women having both masculine and feminine leadership traits within them. But from what I've seen from stepping away from that corporate environment is very much like, and this is no surprise, right? That it's a masculine environment built by men for men of years gone by. And I think what's happened is women in particular have learnt very well to take on those kind of masculine leadership traits and perhaps forgotten some of those very natural feminine leadership traits that they get to bring to the table. So the modern leader way for me is bringing that their whole selves to the table, and that also applies to men, which is why I was so fascinated when I saw you talking about this in a sort of similar way. You were kind of hinting towards it because I think it's so crucial that we do stop, we slow down, we take that time out to pause, to look at where we are pushing through when we need to take a step back and we need to put better boundaries in place and we need to say no more and we need to like look at our schedule and look at where we can delegate more and all this kind of thing. So I don't know, is that something new or is that something that you've like had discussions about or makes sense or you would challenge?
No, look, I mean, it resonates. I haven't thought about it in a sort of male female type of way, but I guess I think of so I think the modern leader, the risk for the modern leader, whether you're the CEO or whether you're a department head or whether you're a team, it's almost that sort of always on
Mm.
mentality. And if you particularly working, if you work in Asia for a European company, you have your day work and then you have the night calls. So you literally are always on. So I think the reason I wrote that post was I thought if one person reads this and does something that changes their approach to work and life, then that would be a win for me, right? That somebody else doesn't have to go through what I went through. But I think, um, in terms of that male female EQ IQ, to me it's about trying to find the right balance. And I think people who are in leadership positions then have the opportunity to set the tone, right? And organizations that ultimately the group CEO sets the tone, but leaders in other parts of the business can set the tone too. So at Swiss Re many years ago, we had a very strong leader who had an investment banking background, and the tone was 24/7, very much always on. And that was a moment in time. But I think in the modern world, trying to find that right balance is important. The problem I think sometimes, Emma, is that people can look at that sort of more holistic approach to life and to work and to balance and say, okay, those people aren't going to work as hard, or they're looking for opportunities not to work. So I think the organization has to be open to it as well, and people need to be able to explain that actually I'm going to be much more productive if I'm allowed time to do the things that are important for me, because it keeps the balance in my life. So physical energy will be better, and then but also mental energy and aptitude will be better as a consequence as well. So I think the leadership have to sort of demonstrate, but the organization has to be willing to receive that at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is, if anything, what I've seen is the challenge is sometimes you have to change the environment to be able to be like your full self and bring this whole thing to the
Yeah,
table if it's not supportive. And I guess my um the support that I bring in is to make sure that happens before you're either pushed or before you're forced to stop because
yeah,
you can't continue at the rate that you are. Um, so I think it's a really interesting conversation to bring. And actually on the balance piece, I don't think it's just work life balance for the individual. I think it's a workplace balance thing
yeah,
because when you've got more leaders leading from this more balanced place, you've got potentially happier employees, more satisfied customers and all that kind of thing. So it does have that ripple effect,
yeah.
and can bring in that balance across the workplace as well.
Yeah, look, and I
Um,
think the sort of the end game of not having this balance is people will be less productive, either on a day-to-day basis because they've got other things, niggles or whatever, or they're going to take time out, which
yeah.
organizations aren't very good at measuring lost productivity anymore because you don't have that sort of clock in, clock out mentality, in flexible working environments, which sound great. People can say, "Hey, I'm not feeling good, or I've got this problem, so I'm going to work from home, and I'm not going to work as hard." So all these things are a lost productivity, which
Mhm.
it's a sort of organizations don't see it because they don't measure it and they can't necessarily feel it. So
Yeah.
it's you need an enlightened leadership and an enlightened organization to really understand what that means.
Yeah. And I feel like there is a shift for sure. There's like more awareness around like the well-being and wellness kind of conversation. I don't know how much of it is lip service and like being seen to be championing some of these things, but I think time will tell. And I think the more we can have these conversations and raise the awareness and just bring it to the table, I think the better. So
Yeah.
I love that you wrote that post. So thank you for doing that. When I was preparing for this conversation, I actually had a little chuckle to myself because I remembered a couple of times back in my earlier career, I guess, where I did kind of come into contact with you for various reasons before I kind of knew you to work closely with you as part of that core team. But it kind of brought up this kind of reminder of like the imposter syndrome, which is a conversation I have a lot on on this podcast because it's rife, and unfortunately, the stats that are out there from some of the research that's been done is not just a female thing for sure. It's a male thing as well, and actually, the percentages are quite close in terms of it's like 59% of no 60% of women feel like an imposter on a regular basis at work, and then something like 59% of men also experience it. So it's quite high. And I
Hmm.
wonder, actually, before I get into my own experience, I wonder, have you ever felt like an imposter? Like you
Oh,
don't
sure.
belong? Yeah.
Yeah, loads of times. Normally, for me, it's normally been when your job has changed and you take on the next role. And, I guess if you have a reasonably progressive career, your next role is normally a bit bigger or whatever. So I remember, if you want an example, so when I was running our Japan and Korea business, the team was around, I don't know what, 30, 35 people. And then I was asked to go and run our Australia, New Zealand business, which was a team of around just under 200 people.
Mhm.
I didn't really particularly think about it at the time. But I remember when I visited Sydney as a sort of warm up visit, they had an office sort of get together for that, and I sort of walked into this big room where everyone was standing, milling around, having a drink and waiting with the head of HR, who sort of banged the table and said, "Oh, everyone, I'd like you to welcome our new CEO." And then 200 people look round at you. And I was almost like looking over my shoulder. Yeah, where is this? Oh, it's me, right? And I think, oh, okay. Now you think, okay, I've got to. This is the moment where you've got to say something and make a good first impression. And you sometimes think, what? How did that happen? You know. So it definitely happens normally at moments of change, or normally when you're doing something different
Mm,
that you sort of question yourself. But it's interesting now as in a period of garden leave where you start to talk to people, like I said, your network in the market, and there are things that about the markets, about the business, about management that you kind of like take for granted because you've been doing it, and then you chat to people and you offer them some thought or some insight which feels pretty basic, and they're like, wow, that's really helpful, thank you. So I think anyone who feels that imposter syndrome, I would say it's normal, all right? But have confidence in yourself and your ability. The reason you're there is because a group of other people said, actually, you can do it. So no, nobody. I think people who go in sort of super arrogant and say, I could do this no matter what. That's worse, actually. To
yeah.
to actually ask yourself the question, but then to have the answers to say, you know what, I can do this. I have done
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like usually with imposter syndrome, there is zero evidence to suggest that you're a fraud and you shouldn't be there because all the evidence stacks up in your favor. You've got the promotions, you've got the performance reviews, you've got the good feedback and all these things. So it's kind of an irrational thought process that goes on. And yeah, to normalize it, I think is great to say that you're not alone. And around a table of 10 people, there's going to be six people that are perhaps feeling like they don't belong here as well. And I feel like there's more we can do to help people unravel that. And I had like this was rife throughout my career, and when I started talking about it when I left, I did my first video where I said, this is what I'm going to do. And it's going to be about talking about my anxiety and my imposter syndrome. People were like, what? You were so confident. And I was like, yeah, I just had this really good mask on. Like below the surface, I was crumbling.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole just to get me out of there, out of that situation. And one of them, I have to laugh about this. You invited me, probably not personally, but I was invited to be part of your top table at the Savoy as part of the top talent. I don't know if you remember this one, but it was a charity ball for staff, and you were sat here, and the other side was the CEO of Jaguar, I think, who had donated a car for the raffle for the auction, and I choked on a bit of bread, but you would never have known that. I thought I was going to die in the name of keeping silent and not making a fuss. And oh my God, like literally, you were talking across me, and I had this bit of bread stuck in
Oh
my
no.
throat. It was terrible. I eventually managed to cough it out very gracefully, but I mean, crikey, I just it's just it's a funny story in hindsight, but at the time I didn't feel like I could make a fuss because I was at this top talent table and like here I was amongst all these important people. So there was that, and there was another time where we were having this innovation kind of thing where I think it was down in Folkestone, and you came into our room where we were innovating, and I never saw myself as a particularly creative person, especially and in hindsight, I realize it's probably because I didn't really have much to innovate around insurance. I'm fine in my own business. I'm very creative, but I remember feeling so much pressure to say something, to have an idea to throw into the mix, and you being there just put all this pressure on me. And I had all these voices go around in my head saying, you can't say that. Like I had these ideas, but I was like, can't say that. It was stopping me. It was pulling me back. And lo and behold, you might not believe this, but you actually came up with an idea that was on the tip of my tongue. I wasn't bold enough to say it. And I was kind of like gobsmacked because I was like, have you just stolen that from my head? And it's one of those moments where you're like, you go out kicking yourself that you didn't have the balls to say it. You didn't have the just
Yeah, yeah.
you just couldn't say it, and it just made me chuckle when I was thinking about it because they literally have come back today as memories. But what would you say to someone that's perhaps resonating with feeling like that in these meetings, whether it's these innovation kind of environments where you're all invited to come and throw your ideas in the mix, or it's that situation where you're at a formal event and you can't choke to death because you don't want to make a fuss?
Well, let's think about that question and idea one as a more sort of day-to-day example. Yeah, I mean we've all been there with a question in our mind, but then the either the audience is a bit intimidating or the size of the room, with the number of people there is a bit intimidating. But the experience you had is exactly the one people should avoid, where someone else asks the question that you had, and then the people, most people on the stage or whatever it is will normally be grateful for questions because the your worst nightmare is no question. So if someone asks something, it doesn't matter if it's a silly question or a stupid question or whatever. You're actually really happy to have it. So and easy questions are much easier to answer as well. So. I would just encourage people, when you come to that fork in the road and you say speak or don't speak, just push to the speak, to the speak side. It's also a thing that gets you noticed as well, right? So I've definitely been in rooms where I haven't asked a question. I thought, oh, why didn't I ask? Why didn't I do it? Why didn't I do it? But I think the people who genuinely participate because they've got energy and passion and they've got ideas, and not always the right idea sometimes, that's a people, management will sort of take that as a positive just because you see that face in the in the crowd. One of the best experiences I have had sort of doing a presentation and a Q&A was when I did one for the it's the sort of the London Institute of the CII, There's a very big membership, and we had an event at Swiss Re's London offices, and there was a sort of bit of a chat and a bit of an interview, and then I did that thing where I said, "How has anyone got a question?" We had about 10 minutes till drinks, and literally 30 hands went up, and and I was like, "Wow, we're gonna need more time, or we're gonna have to get the drinks brought in here." And that, for a speaker, that's just such a tremendous thing because you're getting warm feedback from the audience that what you've said is interesting and
Yeah,
what you know. So it's a two-way street, right? People, so yeah, don't be shy. Take a
absolutely.
chance. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. So what else have you been up to this year and like what have you got in the pipeline? Anything planned or are you just
Yeah.
enjoying your gardening leave?
No, so I mean, so obviously when I was struggling with my bad back, that was a time of not being able to do so much. But since that's recovered, actually, it's been a time of well, I guess a split between travel and talking to the network to explore next options. So the travel side is great because my kids are now university age, so it's allowed travel outside of holiday season, which is amazing because it's a bit cheaper, it's a bit cool, it's a bit cooler, and where you go is a bit quieter as well, so you can just get the best
Mm.
out of places, and you can go to all the places that you've thought about going to. So that's been great. And then the other side has really just been starting to explore with contacts in the market and headhunters what might be out there, and that's where you get this good feeling that from the network that you've maintained, from the experience that you've built, whether what doesn't have to be the jobs that I've done, whatever job you've done, you think actually you get a sense of worth. Maybe that's a good way to kind of describe it. And as part of that process of coming out of out of a situation of being essentially made redundant, it's one of those. As you come out the other side with a sense of worth and a sense of value, that's a great feeling.
Mm. Oh, I'm excited to see what you do next. So please do continue to share with us on LinkedIn, won't you?
I
And
will.
and
If I
we'll
have something interesting to say, I'll share it for sure.
excellent. Thank you, Russell, so much for being here with us today for our 100th episode.
Yeah,
Um,
well, congratulations on
thank
getting to
you.
100, and here's to the next 100 as well, Emma. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for everyone listening, thanks for being here again. Next week, we are back for the second birthday, actually. It coincides within a week. And I'm talking about my own redundancy journey. It's a rerun of the most popular downloaded episode of the 100 episodes so far. So tune in again next week. And Russell, thank you again. And for everyone else, take care.
Thank you.